Yes, my wife cheated on me, and indeed, she left me for another man. Initially, I was consumed by rage and wished to damage both of them. However, that never materialized. Nevertheless, I acknowledge this might appear as a revenge story, though that was never my intention. I'm Randy Clipson, just an ordinary guy. I'm not a handsome figure, and a significant portion of my life was marked by excess weight. A shift occurred in high school, due to my involvement in football, earning me the nickname Chipper. They used to say that if I chipped someone, they were going down at 6 feet, 3 inches tall and weighing 260 pounds. Playing football was somewhat expected. While not excelling as an athlete, I possessed substantial upper body strength. Even in high school, enabling me to push defensive linemen backward. Football proved instrumental throughout my 4 school years, aiding in shedding the excess fat I had carried for most of my life. Despite retaining a bit of a belly, the accumulated muscle more than compensated. Nonetheless, having been overweight for most of my life, the self-perception as a fatty lingered. Coupled with this mindset, I was painfully shy, due to constant weight-related teasing during grade. In middle school and high school, being a football player shielded me from such mockery, and it came with certain privileges, no longer making me an outcast among the girls. Despite not attracting cheerleaders, some girls were willing to go out with me nonetheless. I didn't engage in much dating until my senior year, when I crossed paths with Cindy. Cindy Crawley transferred to our school in the latter part of my junior year, but she caught my attention only in senior year. Despite possessing the most beautiful face I had ever seen, Cindy carried at least 30 to 40 pounds of extra weight. This deterred most boys in my class, and I regret to admit that I initially shared that lack of interest. Our connection deepened when we became chemistry partners. While the subject was complicated for me, Cindy excelled and provided significant assistance. I owe her for my success in chemistry, which likely paved the way for my college journey. During our partnership, I discovered Cindy's friendly and humorous nature, along with a shared background of starting school late. Cindy had overcome a congenital heart defect, and I was held back a year by my parents, making both of us 19. Summoning all my courage, I decided to ask her out, understanding her initial suspicion, given her challenging past. Despite her reluctance, she agreed to go out with me. Our first date, a simple outing to the movies, followed by an ice cream soda, was enjoyable. However, my shyness prevented me from attempting to kiss her. Instead, I shook her hand and asked if I could call her, and her thrilled reaction led to several subsequent dates. Over the next few weeks, by the third date, I summoned the courage to give Cindy a kiss on the cheek, progressing to necking and reaching first base. The more I encountered Cindy, the more my affection for her deepened. While my developing romance was progressing, the football season took an unexpected turn. Cavern High, my high school, wasn't renowned for football prowess, but this season brought a surprising alignment of stars. Kirk Simmons, our standout quarterback, led the team with the Bailey twins, Todd and Jason serving as our running backs. Now positioned as the left tackle, I successfully shielded Kirk's blindside, ensuring he remained unsacked, despite losing our initial game to Mohawk High, with a score of 21-17. A perennial football powerhouse, we rebounded with 7 consecutive wins, progressing to the regionals. Although we reached the state finals, and suffered a 28-14 defeat from Towson High, there was a positive note, triumphing over Mohawk High in the semifinals, with a satisfying 38-7 victory. My apologies for the occasional indulgence in reminiscing about the glory days of high school football. Meanwhile, my relationship with Cindy continued, evolving to the next level. As prom season approached, I promptly invited Cindy to be my date. Her joyful acceptance was sealed with a big affectionate kiss. Over the 4 weeks leading up to the prom, Cindy underwent a crash diet, shedding about 20 pounds to fit into the prom dress she had acquired. When I picked her up for the prom, my eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. Despite being what most guys might consider on the heavier side, I found her stunning. Cindy always had a generous bust, but it became more pronounced in that light blue prom dress. The dress struggled to contain her chest, which threatened to spill over. The entire evening was a dream as we danced together. As the night concluded, I suggested going parking, but Cindy had different plans, directing me to a wooded area, about 30 miles outside of town. Cindy explained that her uncle had a small cabin he used for hunting. The cabin was indeed small, featuring only a tiny kitchen, a couch in front of a television, a bed and a bathroom. We started on the sofa with our usual playfulness, concluding the night on a high note. Despite our extracurricular activities, I got Cindy back home 15 minutes before her 2 a.m. curfew. Cindy and I remained close throughout the rest of high school, engaging in a physical relationship while being cautious with protection. Following graduation, I received a partial football scholarship at a Division II school 2 states away, while Cindy opted for a local community college. My major was computer science and hers was psychology. Since I was heading off to school, we discussed what to do about our relationship. By mutual agreement, we decided to break up, feeling it wouldn't be fair to hold each other back. It was the toughest decision I had ever made. I can't even explain how awful I felt going off to school and leaving Cindy behind. She told me that if we were meant to be together, it would happen. I was terrified of losing her and hurting so badly. Upon my arrival at Mountain Ridge University, the thought of heading straight home crossed my mind, but I couldn't go back on my commitment. I had pledged to honor my commitment to the university, and my strong desire for a college education fueled my determination. The only solution I could think of was immersing myself in football practices and schoolwork from morning till night. I dedicated myself to keeping my mind occupied, despite the coach's advice against it. My coaches and teachers were impressed by my work ethic. Taking a full load of classes, being a college football player meant shedding fat, and building muscle through intensive weight training, resulting in both upper and lower body strength. With only a partial scholarship, my parents covered the remaining balance, even though I knew they struggled with the cost. Playing football left me with no means to contribute financially. While I lacked funds to come home, I made a weekly call to Cindy, who appeared as devastated by our split as I was. My first college year concluded successfully, excelling in both football and academics. By the third game of the season, I earned a spot in the starting lineup, shifting to play left guard due to my slower speed. My increased strength proved beneficial, contributing to our 8-2 season record academically. I ended the year on the dean's list, much to my parents' delight. During the summer, Cindy and I resumed our relationship. I found myself deeply in love with her, or so I believed at the time. Reflecting on it, I've questioned whether it was love or just lust. After careful consideration, I leaned towards love, as a small part of me still holds affection for her. I worked and took 3 online courses during the summer, determined to finish college as soon as possible. Cindy and I also resumed our bed activities, exploring each other's bodies whenever possible. I completed college in 3 years and married Cindy right after graduation, both employed by the multinational software and electronics company, Tri-Orbit Electronics in Virginia. We worked in software development and human resources, respectively. After saving enough money, we purchased a small house and began discussing starting a family. The first 3.2 years of our marriage were wonderful except for one aspect. We both gained a significant amount of weight. Cindy reached 230 pounds, and I weighed in at 310 pounds. I carried the extra weight better due to my height, but neither of us was content with the excess pounds. Despite unsuccessful attempts at dieting, my love for Cindy remained unwavering, regardless of her size. After 3 years of marriage with no kids, we consulted our family doctor. Following a series of tests, he found nothing wrong with either of us, but suggested weight loss might aid Cindy's conception. So for the first time in our lives, we embarked on a strict diet. 6 months later, Cindy was down 50 pounds. I was only down about 25, but I must admit that I cheated more than I should have. Cindy's weight loss was noticeable, attracting attention from men. Alongside the diet, Cindy began going to the gym 5 days a week. Observing her transformation, I realized I had to step up my efforts. I strictly adhered to our diet and started hitting the gym with her. At the end of 1 year of dieting, Cindy had shed 80 pounds and I had lost 90. While we both felt really good about ourselves, sadly, our weight loss was going to bring me a broken heart. As Cindy continued to lose weight, she started dressing in more revealing clothing. Initially enjoyable, I became displeased when I overheard some comments. At work, however, I couldn't say anything because for her whole life, Cindy had been an ugly duckling. Now she had turned into a beautiful swan. The real problem for me arose when Kirk Simmons was appointed head of human resources. He was now a senior director of the company. I was just a senior programmer, and he was now 2 levels above me. Becoming Cindy's boss initially, I didn't think much of it. Kirk was married to Susie Looper, who had been a cheerleader in high school. I had seen her at company functions, and she was still quite attractive. Hardly noticing her, I ended up dancing with her at my wife's request. As she danced with her boss during a Christmas party, I danced a few times with Susie while Kirk partnered, with Cindy dancing just beside her. I found myself becoming noticeably excited. It wasn't a big deal though, as still being in my 20s, any pretty girl could elicit the same response. One surprising aspect was that she wasn't a stuck-up snob, which pleased me. Upon Kirk and I arriving, "I didn't recognize you or Cindy." Susie complimented us, expressing that we looked fabulous. My perception of Cindy's beauty had always been high, but now she was truly stunning. I mentioned, somewhat embarrassed, that someone should keep an eye on her. The response was a simple thank you. I expressed gratitude for Susie's kindness, and she blushed in response. The music concluded, and around 5 months before our 4th anniversary, Cindy revealed a significant decision. She informed me of her choice to resume taking birth control pills. I raised objections, inquiring about our plans for having children. She straightforwardly mentioned that she had decided not to have any. At the moment, my anger surfaced as I probed into her abrupt decision. She reassured me, stroking my arm, stating, "Look, we'll have kids, I just don't want to get fat again. I want to enjoy being slim for a while." In hindsight, I should have recognized the problem at that moment, but I was clueless, having complete trust in Cindy. Unfortunately, my trust in Kirk was misplaced, as I could trust him as far as I could throw a bus. Unbeknownst to me, Kirk had put on a full court press to get Cindy. She, of course, was flattered beyond belief that the former football captain of our high school team was pursuing her. I first became concerned when Cindy began working late, and then going supposedly out with girlfriends. I was genuinely clueless about these things, but I'm not stupid. When Cindy started coming in later and later, I became suspicious. I didn't want to believe that she was cheating on me, but I couldn't ignore the signs. I hired a PI company, and within a week, they had all the evidence I needed. They had a video of Cindy and Kirk engaging in a lovemaking act. In the office, how they obtained that, I have no idea. They had pictures of them being affectionate at dinner. Videos showed Kirk coming to my house while I was at work. Lastly, there were pictures of them engaging in a lovemaking act on our living room floor. I knew they took those through the front window of our house. Remember when I said that I couldn't really describe what it was like having closeness with Cindy the first time? Well, I have no words to explain the pain that I felt finding out that my wife was cheating on me. Not only that, but she was cheating with someone who had been a friend of mine. Granted, Kirk and I were not close, but I had still considered him a friend. It hurt unbelievably. I still held out hope that once I confronted Cindy, she would come to her senses. I was in love with her, and I thought she was still in love with me. I took the evidence home that night, and after dinner I told Cindy we needed to talk. She looked at me curiously, but sat at the kitchen table to listen. Cindy immediately turned white, and then buried her face in her hands. She started to cry and ran to the bathroom. I went and knocked on the door, but she refused to open it. I waited in the kitchen with a glass of rum. Finally she came out and sat down at the kitchen table. With her head down I spoke coldly, asking what the other person had to say. She mentioned that she didn't intend for it to happen, speaking in a voice just above a whisper. Cindy reacted, expressing disapproval, and stating that there was no need for crudeness. She implied that if I had paid more attention to her, the situation might have been avoided. Initially taken aback, I briefly considered whether I had neglected her. However, my anger resurfaced, and I asserted that she shouldn't try to shift blame. I maintained my innocence, and confronted her about the affair, asking for her explanation. She looked nervously at me but remained silent. I pressed further, inquiring about our next steps. Struggling to control my anger, I questioned whether she wanted to be with Kirk, or with me despite expressing love for me. She tearfully admitted to also loving Kirk. I conveyed that a decision needed to be made. Almost biting my tongue, I set a deadline, insisting on knowing her choice by the next day. If she chose to stay with me, she would have to sever ties with Kirk, resign from her job and commit to attending counseling. Cindy acknowledged this later. I retrieved all her belongings, placing them in the hall, and informed her that she could sleep in the guest room until she made up her mind. The next day I returned home early from work. The truth was that I couldn't concentrate, and was less than useless. My stomach had been doing flip-flops all day. At one point during the morning, I thought I was going to lose what little breakfast I had eaten. About 6 o'clock, Cindy came in with a very nervous look on her face. I was sitting at the kitchen table, as I had the previous night. She took a seat across from me, and I demanded to know if she had made up her mind. Tears started to flow down her cheek, as she expressed her love for me, but admitted an inability to give up Kirk, stating that she loved him too. I sighed deeply, attempting to conceal the fact that my heart was breaking. Acknowledging her choice, she simply nodded, causing a pain deeper than if someone had stabbed me. My brain was about to explode. I was going back and forth at 1,000,000 miles an hour, between eliminating them both, and curling up in the corner and crying my eyes out. I sarcastically remarked that she had chosen quite the winner, bringing up Kirk and Susie's new baby boy. I questioned whether it bothered her to leave the child without a father. A hint of anger and shame crossed Cindy's face, as she mentioned that Kirk had planned to divorce Susie before their involvement continuing. I asked if she was willing to discard almost 4 years of marriage, just like that. Struggling to contain both my temper and tears, I sought an understanding of her decision. To be truthful, right then, I was seriously considering smacking Cindy to a pulp, and then go look for Kirk to break his neck. She softly expressed regret for any hurt caused, her voice tender. She clarified that she hadn't intended for it to happen, but had fallen deeply in love with Kirk, and he felt the same way. She asserted the need to be with him, despite feeling an intense urge to damage her. At that moment, I recognized the importance of maintaining control. It required all my self-control, but I eventually succeeded. Deep within the logical part of my brain, I recognized that resorting to physical violence would yield nothing. I refrained from revealing the depth of her hurt, and refused to beg her to stay, considering it the worst thing a cheated-on husband can do. A sign of total weakness, I plainly stated that if the other person desired a divorce, they would have it. Confusion filled her eyes, and perhaps I imagined it. A hint of hurt. She might have expected me to fight to keep her, but I knew that if she had decided to leave, there was nothing I could do or say to stop her. Cindy was taken aback by my behavior, but rose and started packing her belongings. The following day, I visited the bank and our financial advisor, explaining the situation, and withdrawing half the funds from each account. I then established separate accounts in my name only, canceled all our credit cards, and applied for new ones solely in my name. I listed our house for sale through a realtor friend, and finally consulted a divorce lawyer. With a heart full of hatred, I ensured Cindy was served at work, citing infidelity as the cause. The divorce proceedings were relatively straightforward. With only about 4 years of marriage and no children, there was nothing to dispute. We split everything evenly and went our separate ways. Kirk's divorce was messier, dealing with a child under a year-old and Susie. Having never worked, he faced child support and alimony. One aspect of Kirk's divorce that admittedly brought me some satisfaction was his decision to cut costs on his lawyer. Instead of limiting spousal maintenance to a year or two, it was set at 15 years. Kirk wasn't pleased, but he signed the papers. 2 months after the divorces were finalized, Kirk and Cindy got married. It was a bitter pill to swallow. The initial week post-breakup left me utterly lost. Not being much of a drinker, that held no appeal for weeks. Revenge consumed my thoughts. I'm sure every guy who's been cheated on can relate. I even began searching the internet for information on how ex-husbands sought revenge on their former wives and lovers. I found myself in a dark place, even purchasing a weapon then. As I read story after story about guys getting revenge, a shift occurred in my perspective. Initially, my thoughts of revenge were centered on violence. Subsequently, I considered damaging their property, contemplating ideas like flattening all their tires, putting sugar in their gas tanks, flooding their new house, and various other impractical schemes. As I read more revenge stories, I recognized the absurdity in most of them, realizing No feasible way to achieve the revenge I desired. Eventually I sought counseling at my church. The pastor spent almost 2 hours explaining that seeking revenge wouldn't alleviate the hurt from my wife's betrayal, regardless of how much pain I inflicted on my former wife or her new husband. The emotional anguish would persist. The pastor's advice, though, seemingly simple for someone with my kind of pain, emphasized that only time and distance would heal my heart. Despite my initial skepticism, I acknowledged that being near Cindy, without the possibility of being with her, would continually reopen the emotional wound. I also accepted the pastor's truth about revenge. It wouldn't alleviate the hurt. Consequently, I followed his counsel, necessitating the establishment of distance. Between Cindy and me, an opportunity arose. When I heard rumors that the company was in trouble, apparently the firm had entered into a contract with the Defense Department. The deal promised significant profits, but there was a downside. Our firm was charged with developing an entirely new software and electronics package for the Air Force's fighters and bombers. It's entirely classified, so I can't provide details. Suffice to say, it aimed to position the United States ahead of Russia and China, contingent on my company's successful delivery. The rumor circulating was that the project was significantly behind and over budget, making it different from typical government contracts. While substantial profits were at stake, the company faced great risk. Unlike other government projects, there would be no progress payments during the development of this software and its accompanying electronic components. Tremendous penalties loomed for late delivery, and the company could possibly go under if the project didn't meet the contract requirements. As one of the senior software designers, I was called in to consult on the impending disaster. Most other designers were hesitant to get involved, updating their resumes and considering leaving the company. Taking on the project meant risking termination and potential company collapse. The stigma of failure would linger for a long time. However, considering my modest needs post-divorce, the prospect of losing my job seemed manageable. Learning that Cindy was pregnant added emotional weight, as I had always envisioned starting a family with her. Evaluating the project data provided, it became clear that the chosen direction wouldn't work. Despite the risks, I agreed to take on the assignment and headed for California, putting about 3,000 miles between my ex-wife and me. Reminiscent of my first year in college, I delved into my work, enduring long days, sometimes spanning 20 hours. Leaving little time to contemplate Cindy, I terminated 3/4 of the programmers and all engineers handling electronic components, bringing in fresh talent. Despite the looming 11-month deadline, I scrapped their progress. Relying on the creativity of engineers I brought on board, including some poached from rival companies, their skepticism turned to astonishment when I explained what I wanted them to build and why I envisioned the electronic components in that particular way. Yet, the challenge shifted to making the software functional. Gradually, we crafted a program that instilled confidence in me. It wasn't until 3 weeks before delivering our product to the military that I was certain of our success. The initial test, merging the software and electronic components, displayed a 96% success rate. Scanning the 4% that hadn't worked identified easy fixes. The revelation of our program's success triggered a surge in company stocks by over 300 points within a couple of months. Subsequently, the Defense Department announced the expansion of our contract to include the Navy, Army, and Marines, forecasting billions in profits. The success didn't halt there. I recognized the potential to tweak the program for various commercial applications. Essentially, we removed all classified information, creating an outstanding platform for practical uses. The array of things adaptable to this program seemed boundless. Following this triumph, I earned a promotion to Senior Vice President, tasked with developing these commercial applications. In the years that followed, frequent returns to the Virginia home office never led to encounters with Kirk or Cindy. Despite not anticipating any impact on me, I desired no contact, having nothing to convey to either of them. The pastor's counsel about putting time and distance between heartbreak had proven 100% accurate. I had moved on. During one visit, I unexpectedly met Kelly Bailey, a former cheerleader from Cavern High, and Susie's best friend. Aware of her marriage to Jason Bailey and having a son, before I met Cindy, I always harbored a crush on Kelly, the prettiest cheerleader. Kelly's warm demeanor in high school made her impossible not to like. Although she had aged somewhat, she remained physically attractive. In contrast to Cindy's short, blonde hair and ample figure, Kelly, standing barely 5 feet 3 inches tall, had long black hair and proportionally smaller chest. A shared warmth in their smiles was the commonality. Stunned that she recognized me in a grocery store, preparing for a board presentation, we exchanged smiles. Despite a few gray hairs and small wrinkles, I still had a slight crush. Kelly called out to me as I pondered over frozen dinners. Upon recognizing her voice, I blushed slightly. She then stopped her basket next to mine, and I greeted her with a smile, expressing my flattery at her recognition. She confessed that she wouldn't have recognized me if Susie hadn't pointed me out. During lunch at Tri-Orbit, I was genuinely surprised when she mentioned that. She then smiled and confirmed that she had been working at Tri-Orbit for about 6 years, specifically in the marketing department. It surprised me to learn that Kelly worked at the same company as me. I felt a twinge of guilt for not knowing that. However, since I had little involvement with marketing, I shouldn't have felt bad. Still, I felt like I should have been aware. "How are you doing?" I eventually asked to ease my discomfort. "I'm doing as well as can be expected," she replied, a hint of sadness in her voice. "I'm divorced now. Jason has turned out to be a real idiot. Not only was he cheating with his secretary, but also with half a dozen other women. He even got one of them pregnant. I divorced him, of course. He got off pretty lightly considering what he was doing. There was no alimony, because our salaries are about the same. We didn't own a house and had very little savings. All he was ordered to do was pay child support. Still, I have to hassle him for it every month. I don't mind bugging him to get the money, but he totally ignores our son Scott. I get furious when I think about it. She said I apologized to Kelly, expressing regret over Jason's behavior. I admitted that although I was aware he had a wild side, I had hoped he would calm down after marriage. Pausing for a moment, I looked into Kelly's emerald green eyes, feeling unsure of what to say next. Eventually I mentioned that my wife and I were divorced, with Cindy choosing to pursue Todd.
No, Randy.
Kelly shook her head. It was Kirk who pursued Cindy. Susie told me all about it. I suppose I can't argue with that. I admitted, but it takes two to tango. You're not seriously thinking about eating any of these frozen dinners, are you? She asked, eyeing my cart. Yeah, I'm afraid so, I nodded. I'm a terrible cook and this is about all I can handle. Look, if you'd like a home-cooked meal, why don't you come over to my house? It won't be fancy, but I guarantee it will be good. Initially I hesitated, but the idea of a home-cooked meal proved too tempting to resist. I mentioned that I wouldn't mind having a real meal, if it wasn't too much trouble. I couldn't recall the last time I had one. The evening turned out to be delightful. Kelly made meatloaf with mashed potatoes, string beans and sherbet for dessert. It was enjoyable having someone to converse with. Scotty, as his mother called him, was a very outgoing and friendly kid. I discovered that he was a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan. Like me, we had a great time discussing the team and their prospects for the upcoming season. I was a die-hard fan and also a season ticket holder. In fact, I had 4 season tickets on the 50-yard line. The company covered them because I would take potential clients to the games. When I didn't have any clients, I'd invite my buddies, and if I couldn't find anyone to go with me, I'd go alone. I'd give away the other 3 tickets, usually to people trying to buy from a scalper. Scotty expressed a wish to attend a game someday, sounding wistful in response. I impulsively offered to make it happen. Once the words left my mouth, I realized I had overstepped, and swiftly attempted to rectify it. That is, of course, if your mother approves. Scotty turned to his mother with imploring eyes. All she said is, we'll discuss it at the end of the evening. I apologized. I'm sorry about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offer. It slipped out before I realized. But just so you know, I have 4 season tickets to all the Bucs home games, and a ton of frequent flyer miles. If you wouldn't mind him attending a game with me, I'd be thrilled to take him. She stood there with piercing eyes, and I realized that I had made another mistake. Quickly I attempted to rectify it, but only ended up making another blunder. After a brief pause I stuttered out that the invitation also extended to her. I suggested securing separate rooms, with one for Kelly and Scotty and another for myself. Despite feeling embarrassed, Kelly simply smiled and called me the sweetest man. While chuckling, she remarked that my expression was priceless. Feeling relieved, I sighed as I truly didn't want to offend her. I enjoyed her company, and hoped we could meet up from time to time. Deciding to push ahead, I said, would you mind if I asked you out when I come to town? If you're with someone, I'll understand. I just really enjoyed having someone to talk to. Kelly studied me for a moment, then smiled. Randy, I've known you since high school. I always thought you were cute, and one of the nicest guys, but never considered dating you because I had Jason. Now that I've gotten to know you a little, yes, I'd be pleased if you called me, and I'd love to go see the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with you and Scotty over the following year. I call Kelly every time I returned to Virginia, and we'd get together several times. I booked trips back east, when I really didn't have to be there. It wasn't a love affair at first. We were just good friends, who enjoyed spending time together. I took Kelly and Scotty to the final game of the season. That year, the Bucs needed to win to make it into the playoffs, and they did. Scotty was beside himself with joy over the win. That night after Scotty went to bed, Kelly came over to my room, and we became more than just good friends. When Kelly knocked on my door unexpectedly, I was engrossed in watching a local sports station analyze the Bucs game. Concerned, I asked if everything was all right, particularly about Scotty's well-being. Kelly reassured me with a smile that nothing was wrong, and that Scotty was sleeping peacefully, excited about the playoffs. She expressed a desire to have a drink and talk. Feeling a bit underdressed, in my boxer shorts and t-shirt, I mentioned that I needed to put on some pants before inviting her in. However, upon searching for my trousers, I realized they weren't where I thought I had left them. Kelly said there was no need for pants, as she pushed the door open and entered the room hurriedly. As I continued searching for my pants without success, Kelly giggled at the situation, causing my face to flush red with embarrassment. She then suggested putting us on an even playing field. I felt uncomfortable and proceeded to remove her skirt, leaving us both in our underwear. With a smile, she asked me to mix her a drink and join her for a conversation. I went to the minibar, retrieving 2 small bottles of rum and 2 cans of Coke. As I mixed the drinks, Kelly climbed onto my bed and sat cross-legged, her white laced underwear catching my attention. After handing Kelly her drink, I looked around the room for a place to sit. Sensing my hesitation, Kelly gestured towards the bed and invited me to sit beside her, reassuring me that she wouldn't bite. Despite still feeling embarrassed and red-faced, I nodded and took a seat next to her. A big swallow of my drink helped me relax. As the rum coursed through my body, we talked for a while, and when we finished our drinks, I took her cup and asked if she wanted another. She shook her head and I waited for her to get up. I figured she'd head back to her son. I was totally wrong about that. Not sure what to do, I put the cups in the wastebasket and sat down again. When I did, Kelly kissed me on the lips. It was quick and soft, sending an electrical charge through my body. She saw my surprise and smiled. I've been waiting for months for you to kiss me. I figured that you still thought of me as that high school cheerleader who was unattainable. Let me assure you that I am not that person anymore. Kelly had read me like a book. There had been so many times that I wanted to kiss her, but was afraid. I didn't want to take a chance of losing her. As a friend, I leaned forward and kissed her. We kissed a long time with our tongues, exploring every part of each other's mouths. She tasted so sweet after we parted ways. I expressed admiration, mentioning that she was a beautiful and amazing woman. Kelly then laid her head on my chest. That night of passion surpassed my first time with Cindy. 6 months after that night, Kelly and I became engaged. Scotty was thrilled that I was going to be his dad. A year after that night we were married. Jason had been as big a turd as Kelly had claimed. He barely spoke to his son and he really resented me. Jason was still close friends with Kirk. And every time he came to Kelly's apartment, when I was there he had to tell me how happy they were, and what great closeness Kirk and Cindy were having. I guess he thought it would make me jealous. I just listened and said nothing. What I did learn was that Kirk was still heading up the human resources department for the company, but Cindy had given up her job to be a full-time mom. I was a little surprised to learn that Kirk and Cindy had 3 kids now, but it no longer bothered me at all. One time when I heard Kelly on the phone, giving Jason help for not sending the support payment, I made the mistake of telling her to forget about it. I was more than willing to pay whatever. For Scotty's needs, Kelly spoke sternly, insisting that I needed to stay out of the situation. She expressed determination not to let him off the hook for child support. Despite his neglect of his son, I promptly withdrew my statement, acknowledging that the money in question belonged to Scotty. In December I was set to be appointed executive vice president of the company. The announcement was scheduled for the Christmas party at the Washington Convention Center, with around 400 to 500 attendees. I felt a bit self-conscious about the grand recognition at this event, but Kelly was overjoyed. She scolded me for complaining, insisting that I deserve the recognition. I know almost as many people in that company as you do, and they've told me story after story about how this company wouldn't exist if it wasn't for you. They also told me that you'll be the next CEO when Mel steps down next year. I responded, suggesting that it may not matter. However, she countered with a smile, mentioning that she was married to the most beautiful woman in the world and had a surprise for me. We recalled a past incident in Kansas City involving a mishap with a rubber. I acknowledged the memory with a nod, which was followed by a silly grin. She confirmed that she was pregnant now, expressing her determination to keep me close. Embracing me tightly, she expressed her desire for in-bed night if we didn't have to attend the party. I confessed that I wasn't particularly fond of parties anymore, as I had to attend so many that they had lost their appeal. Kelly, however, still seemed to enjoy them, especially when I was with her. She had a certain aura that attracted people to her. We danced for a while before running into Kirk and Cindy, who were accompanied by Jason and his date Kathy. I was genuinely surprised to see Cindy's weight gain and Kirk's protruding belly, while Jason remained in good shape. I speculated that Jason might still be actively seeking romantic encounters. I was unsure what to do, but then someone began talking over the public address system. Could I have your attention for just a moment? I realized it was Mel Stanton, the CEO of TriOrbit. I promise I won't give a long speech. As most of you know, we've been looking to replace Charlie Bruner, our executive vice president, who retired 3 months ago. I knew who I wanted right away, but the board dithered around for 3 months. Well, after months of interviewing dozens of candidates, they finally agreed with me. I'm thrilled to announce that our new executive vice president comes from within our own organization. He has always been a tremendous asset, and now it's time he receives his just reward. I give you our next executive vice president, Randy Clipson. A spotlight was suddenly shining on me, and loud applause broke out from all around the room. Kelly pulled me to her and gave me a long, passionate kiss when the commotion ended, and the party returned to normal. I turned to where Cindy, Kirk, Jason and his date were standing. I didn't know what to say to them. Jason seemed pissed and jealousy filled Kirk's face. However, when I glanced at Cindy, there was a look of sadness and loss. Feeling uncertain about how to proceed, I watched as Kelly took charge. She greeted Kirk, Cindy, and Jason warmly, hugging each of them in turn. Then she turned her attention to Kathy, extending a polite handshake and expressing pleasure in meeting her. I took my lead from my wife. I shook Kirk, Jason and Kathy's hands and gave Cindy a small hug. We chatted briefly and the music began playing. In a surprising twist, Kelly suggested, Randy, why don't you dance with Cindy, and I'll dance with my ex-husband Kathy. Why don't you and Kirk share a dance as well? I looked at Kelly with a questioning expression, but she just smiled knowingly. So I danced with Cindy. I asked about Kirk and Cindy's well-being, because I couldn't think of anything else to say. Cindy responded that things weren't going particularly well, and mentioned that she suspected they were headed for a divorce, because she believed Kirk had been unfaithful. Expressing genuine sympathy, I told her I was sorry to hear about their situation. Cindy responded skeptically, questioning whether I truly meant my apology, as she expected me to say something along the lines of, "It serves you right." I initially expressed shock at the comment, stating that I would never say such a thing. Then I realized there had been a time when I probably would have said something similar. Well, to be truthful, when we first broke up, if you'd come to me then, I probably would have said something like that. But I couldn't hate you, you were my first love, and it hurt to lose you, but life moves on and so have I. Shortly after that, the music stopped, and tears began to stream down Cindy's face. She expressed regret, admitting that leaving me was the biggest mistake of her life, and lamenting that there was nothing she could do to rectify it. As I watched her walk away, I couldn't help but feel genuine sympathy for her. Kelly put her arm around me, prompting me to lean down and kiss her. I inquired about her dance with Jason, to which she responded with a smile, saying that he was still an idiot. He actually tried to put the moves on me. He told me that he's ready to settle down, and he'd be more than happy to take me back. I just laughed at him and told him, why would I want him, when I had the greatest man in the world? I watched Cindy reach their table and sit down. Even from this distance I could see the tears. Kirk and Jason appeared to be having a heated discussion. If I had to guess, I'd say that Kirk tried to put a move on Jason's date. I thought back to the pain I had felt when Cindy left me. Something like that never truly goes away. It's like a bad cut, it leaves a scar. I also thought of all the planning for revenge that filled me during that time. The pastor had been right. No amount of revenge would have ever stopped my pain. It indeed was time and distance that had healed me. As I said at the beginning, even though I had given up on the idea of getting revenge, I had in fact achieved it. My revenge was exacted in the only way that is truly meaningful. To someone who has been cheated on, I was living well loved and totally happy.